Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tackle That Target by Harold Magnussen. Today we're going to be focusing on Tech 1 tackle frigates. Specifically, that is the Atron for Galente, the Slasher for Minmatar, the Executioner for Amar, and the Condor for Caldari. Now, if you open your ship tree and find the ship for that particular race, let's start with Amar, top left for the Executioner. When you hover over the ship, it gives you the bonuses per skill level. You'll see it's got the Amar frigate bonuses for small energy turret, activation cost, and damage. And particularly, it has a roll bonus, which means even if you have Amar frigate level 1, you get the full roll bonus just by being able to sit in the ship. And that is 80% reduction in propulsion jamming systems activation cost. That refers to warp scramblers, warp disruptors, and stasis webifiers. The warp scrambler is the bread and butter of tackle. I'll link the module in fleet chat. A warp scrambler is a short-range, high-effective weapon that requires an active target to be used, and it requires capacitor for every cycle. Tackle frigates have that 80% reduction in capacitor needs, so you can run it with very minimal effect on your small frigate capacitor tool battery. A warp scrambler, once activated on a target within its distance of 7,500 kilometers, will prevent a target from activating their warp drive. They cannot warp away if they are scrammed. Additionally, a warp scrambler will deactivate your opponent's micro warp drive. This is critical. Micro warp drives are what make ships go really, really fast, and if they're scrammed, they lose that ability. They are knocked down to their base velocity, which is usually measured in the hundreds of meters per second versus the thousands of kilometers per second. A warp scrambler also has the added bonus of shutting off micro jump drives. Those are battlecruiser and battleship class modules that allow the ship to jump 100 kilometers in one direction, the direction of its current travel. But if you're scramming a battlecruiser, he cannot NGD away to safety, or a battleship. Scrams are also heavier tackle than long points. A warp disruptor only has 1 point of tackle, whereas a warp scrambler has 2 points of tackle. And that plays into whether your opponent is stabbed if they have warp core stabilizers. Link to module in fleet chat. A warp core stabilizer is anti-tackle, which if you fit to the low slot of your module, gives you a bonus to your ship's warp core strength. If a ship is being tackled, but also has warp core stabilizers equipped to its ship, I can't speak. Then whether or not he can escape is determined by math. If the incoming tackle strength is greater than the ship's warp core strength, he's stuck. If they have more stabs than incoming points of tackle, then they are able to warp away. As an example, if a ship has 3 warp core stabilizers fitted, like an industrial has 3 low slots with warp core stabs, then you are scramming him with 1 warp scrambler 1. That's 2 points of tackle versus his 3 points of stab. He has a warp core strength of 3, you have a tackle strength of 2. He's able to warp away. If an industrial has 4 warp core stabilizers, and you have 2 scrams on your ship, and you're both activated against him, that's 4 points of defensive warp core strength and 4 points of offensive tackle. He still warps away. You need greater tackle strength than core strength. Most combat ships that you tackle will not have any warp core stabilizers equipped to them. Therefore, any amount of tackle strength will hold them in place. They cannot warp away.
If I may, there are also some ships that have a non-zero warp core strength to start out with, like the Venture.
That's a good point. The Venture has a natural hull bonus of +2 to warp core strength, and also the Deep Space Transports have a natural hull bonus, as well as Super Capital and Titan class ships. The Warp Disruptor is a long-range variation of the Warp Scrambler, but has fewer offensive benefits. you gain significant kilometers for range, 20 kilometers with the Tech 1 cold versus 7.5 for the scram, but you lose the ability to turn off micro warp drives. A ship that is pointed cannot warp, but it can still run its micro warp drive, can still activate micro jump drive, and so it's still able to move at full velocity. It also only has 1 point of tackle strength. So if you're trying to tackle an industrial, or say Venture, if you're only pointing a Venture with a Warp Disruptor 1, just one module, he can warp away, because he has a natural 2 bonus, plus 2 bonus to his warp core strength. Even if you are scramming a Venture with 1 Tech 1 Warp Scrambler, he can still warp away. 2 tackle strength versus 2 warp core strength. You would need a scram and a point on a Venture to prevent him from warping away. 3 points of incoming tackle strength versus 2 points of warp core stabilizer. The Stasis webifier is a very effective tackle module, however it does not actually prevent enemy ships from warping away. Instead of preventing warps, the web reduces maximum velocity.
Is this the Carrico room?
No, this is the tackle training fleet. So Stasis webifier has similar range to a warp scrambler, a little bit longer, 10 kilometers base cold for Tech 1. It'll cut your target's velocity by 50% for the base variety. That has no effect on their ability to warp, so if you're only webbing a target, they can still warp away. And often webbing a target will help them warp away faster, because it'll reduce their velocity and suddenly, the way the game calculates speed, they're suddenly at 100% aligned velocity. That's because if they're moving at full speed and they're aligning out to a point, and they're almost at their aligned point, they're 74% of their max velocity. When you web them, their max velocity is suddenly 50% of what it normally would be. So now they're going faster than they would need to be to warp. So you web someone into warp accidentally. Webs always need to be combined with either a warp scrambler or a warp disruptor. First you have to prevent them from warping away, because every target that is in danger of being killed by you and your allied fleet will always try to escape. Fast Tackle's job is to catch them by moving faster and approaching them quickly in order to get into range to activate your tackle modules. Scram them so they can't move fast with micro warp drives, point them initially so they can't warp away, then close the distance with your own micro warp drive, and web them once you're close enough to scram, or even a little bit sooner, to slow them down so other people can catch up. Questions on scrams, points, or webs? Warp scramblers, warp disruptors, Stasis webifiers? Alright, the 5MN micro warp drive is your best friend as a fast tackle frigate. That is what gives you your insane velocity. As I'm simulating my tackle Atron here, if I deactivate the micro warp drive, I have a base navigation speed of 580 meters per second. You will never catch anything except the Tech 1 Industrial moving at that speed. However, if you activate the micro warp drive, my velocity suddenly shoots up to, I'm getting 3.8 kilometers a second, running normally, or considered cold. If you then overheat the module, that gives you a much more significant bonus, which can be run for a short time before the heat damage builds up too much and you risk destroying the module. I can get 5.4 kilometers a second in an Atron with my fit, with a heated micro warp drive. And that is the key to tackling people. Lots of ships can go 3 kilometers a second, especially frigates. But being able to go 5.4 kilometers a second in a frigate is what allows you to catch the cruisers that are normally too fast for you to catch up to. Overheating is very useful as well for your tackle modules. You can overheat a Tech 1 scram from 7.5k, range goes out to 9k, you get an extra 1.5 kilometers. You can heat a web and you get 13 kilometers versus 10, an extra 3 kilometers of range. and you can heat your warp disruptors from 20 to like 22. And of course, Tech 2 modules have better range for tackle modules. Here is an example tackle Atron fit that I personally run in Fleet Chat called Insured, just because I name my ships Insured. In the mid-slots, you'll see the critical components, the 5-man micro warp drive to go fast, the warp scrambler to have hard tackle. A long point warp disruptor isn't really considered tackle, that's just the point. It's the first step of tackle, but it's not secure. You won't secure targets with only a long point, because they'll still be micro warp driving away at high speed. And the Stasis webifier to reduce velocity. Low slots, I have micro auxiliary power core, which I had for a different reason, because I had a shield extender on there earlier. You can change it if you want to. It gives you power grid for the guns, if you have low skills, damage control for tank, and the overdrive injector system to make you go even faster. That's a critical low slot module. The small energy Nosferatu is a very, very useful high slot module. I recommend that everybody have one of those on their ship in some variety of Tech 1 or meta, because getting neutered out as tackle is a big risk. Even with the 80% reduction to capacitor need for your propulsion jamming modules, you can still be completely drained by cruisers or battleships with their medium and heavy newts, and your tackle modules will decycle if you have no capacitor to run them. However, the small Nosferatu cycles faster than your tackle modules do. With proper timing, or just leaving it running, you will always be able to suck a little bit of capacitor out of your target and keep your scram and web running. Damage is kind of a secondary thing for fast tackle. If you can deal damage, that's great, but if not, it's no big deal. Your primary goal is to be fast and to have tackle modules equipped. Tank is also secondary. Your goal here is speed and agility. Survivability is secondary. Most fast tackle's lifespan tends to be measured in like single-digit seconds. If you live more than 10 seconds, you're probably going to survive and win the fight, succeed with the tackle. So I put a little bit of shield resist rigs on mine for a couple more seconds of survivability against light drones or incoming damage. Tech 1 fast tackle frigates with Tech 1 mods or meta mods are very cheap. You're looking at only a couple million ISK per each. Readily affordable for most players. And you can always ask for dojo handouts. We do have some of these available. Not as many tackle in the forward staging in PTAC-Z. We're focusing mainly on crucifiers over there. Once we get things set a little more time to move things over, we'll have some tackle frigates over there as well. So that's the fitting, that's the ships, that's the modules. Let's talk about the process. There are a couple different situations for how to approach tackle. Either the enemy lands out of warp nearby to you on a grid, and then you're going to change your velocity, change your direction to approach them, or maybe warp to something nearby and try to catch them. Maybe they land next to you on a gate. You have to decide either jump through, try and catch them on the other side, or stay on this side and someone else goes through and catch the other side. Maybe they're out somewhere in space and you're trying to find them, so you're warping around, moving around grids. Whenever you find them, the enemy's probably going to be trying to move away from you, so you have to overheat your micro warp drive and burn towards them. Approaching your target is the fastest way to get to them, but not always the best way. You have 0 transversal when you're directly approaching a target, which means turret-based ships will have a perfect shot on you. If you're running your micro warp drive that also blooms your signature radius, making you a big, easy target, you will die in one shot to most things if you're burning straight towards them. There's the spiraling in tactic, which we'll practice later, where you approach the ship at an angle, where you're moving towards them, but not directly. 15-30 degrees away from the side, and you manually adjust your ship as you spiral in towards them closer and closer until you're within range to activate your tackle modules. And then once you're close enough, you can establish an automatic orbit. Once you catch your target, orbiting at 500 meters or maybe orbiting at 1,000 meters is the best idea, because that gives you the highest relative transversal velocity to avoid any gun damage. And you turn off your micro warp drive. Though there are some instances, like for interceptors, where you would want to orbit at a greater distance and leave your micro warp drive running, because they benefit more from warp disruptors. Any questions about Tech 1 tackle mechanics?
So you only micro warp drive until you get to the target, then you cut it, and you just run webs and scrams and stuff.
Yes. The reason being because the micro warp drive moves your ship so fast, if you're using a tight orbit, it'll actually throw you further away from the target than you want to be. Because the way that the game calculates velocity and your autopilot path on an orbit, if you're micro warp driving, you're actually moving too fast in a straight line every second for the game to autocorrect, and you risk losing range on your target if they're also moving at any kind of velocity. So once they're slowed down, you slow down as well. Also, that reduces your cap usage. You would avoid capping yourself out, and it gives you a much smaller signature radius.
Now you mentioned with interceptors, you might want to leave your micro warp drive on. Were you talking about when you're flying an interceptor or when you're trying to tackle one?
When you're flying an interceptor as tackle, because scepters have a whole bonus to disruptor and scram range. They can get 30 kilometer plus warp disruptor range. Because interceptors are so squishy, just like any Tech 1 and like any frigate, even though they're Tech 2, they die very easily. Interceptors generally will point something, and because they are just so ridiculously fast, they'll just keep pointing it and orbiting it at maybe 10 or 15 kilometers with their prop mod on to avoid themselves getting scrammed. So the goal there is to hold it down in space, just so they can't warp off, and give other tackle time to land on grid, and they can easily close the distance to get scrams whenever they need to. But suiciding in for scram, if you're 30 seconds away from help, can usually lead to your interceptor dying. That brings me to the chain of tackle. If you're the very first tackle on a target, it's a high-risk situation, because you're very easily destroyed. Small Tech 1 frigate, small hit points. Light drones or rapid light missiles will eat you up in seconds. And you have to call out your tackle, and you can put W's in fleet. Say, so-and-so I've got XXYZ tackled, W's in fleet. Need secondary. That's the keywords for other tackle in the fleet to warp to you, to get to where you are, and to get secondary tackle. Because if the first ship dies, and there's nobody else on grid with you yet, then the enemy will simply warp away. You have to establish secondary tackle, tertiary tackle, quaternary tackle, so that the first tackler who's probably taking a lot of damage can warp away, or at least secure the target after the first guy dies. Tackle is not a solo activity. You are the first person to get a tackle, that's great, but being the second person to get tackle is often the more important one to secure the kill. Because frigates are faster to warp and to move around space. If the fleet's 30 AU away, that's a long time for a tackle frigate. In the life of a tackle pilot, you could be dead long before the fleet gets there. But another Tech 1 frigate can warp that 30 AU much faster. And so good response times, responding to other tackle to get things. And you can land a secondary. That's important. You hold them for the few more seconds for the rest of the fleet to show up, and then they can kill the target. I can't really think of anything else to talk about for the theory. Let's get into the practice of it. Fleet on dock. We will now begin with the first step in the tackle mechanics you need to know, which is how to warp to your friends. I'm going to warp off to a location on grid. I'm going to simulate that I've tackled the target. So I'm going to say on comms, Harold has so-and-so scrammed at GHAV Keepstar Grid. W's in fleet. All other tackle warp to Harold at 0.
On my way.
You can right-click my name from fleet chat, or hover over to fleet, warp to member at 0. This is only doable to fleet members. If there is a blue who types that same message and says the same thing over comms, but only types letters in, say, the int.catch channel, then you can't warp to them if they're not in the same fleet as you. However, if they're in the standing fleet with you, then you can right-click their name, warp to them at 0. If you're trying to secure tackle, going at 0 is always the best bet if somebody's engaged, because other hostiles will probably be close by to keep them tackled in turn. Oh yeah, Matek, you can just listen in PTXE, that's fine. Let's do a little manual piloting. Please double-click in space and activate your micro-warp drive and fly kind of away from the citadel towards the sun. Spread yourselves out a little bit in space, we'll break tether here. Please right-click my name in fleet chat and add Harold Magnussen to your watch list. This will create a new little pop-up box with my name and 3 gray bars. Those bars are my shield, armor, and hull hit points. You get the same options for right-clicking from a watch list as you do right-clicking from the name in fleet chat. You get the warp to commands, you get anchor commands, keep it range, orbit. Now the minimum warp distance is 150 kilometers. So let's simulate that I've got something tackled here where I am in space. So I'm going to drop a can and say fleet, orbit, Harold Magnussen at 5 kilometers, prop my zone, get secondary tackle on the can. Can you tackle a cargo container? Let's find out. Broadcast it as a target. Make sure your micro-warp drive is on, burn in. You can scram a can, it's very useful for training exercises. Once you are close enough to the can to tackle it with your scram, web, or point, turn off your micro-warp drive, orbit 500 meters. You can do this by right-clicking on the target or the object icon in space, or holding W and left-clicking if you have your orbit default set to 500 meters. W plus left-click is your default orbit command. You can change your default orbit distance by holding left-click over your ship icon in space in the center of your screen, holding the mouse over the 2 o'clock position set default orbit to. You can drag the mouse further away to set the range. I keep mine at 500 meters or 1,000 meters for default orbit. Okay, please deactivate all tackle modules, control space, stop your ships. If you zoomed in and you have graphics turned on, you can see the energy beams coming out of your ships and they're now disappearing. Very good. If you were tackling an actual player ship, you would get aggression from that tackle effect. That's 60 seconds, you cannot jump through any stargates or dock up and tether in any structures. So canceling aggression can be an important thing to be aware of if there's other places you have to be within 60 seconds. Like if there's a fight going on next door and you have something tackled here, but if it's a low priority target, you may need to let them go and go move over next door, degress, wait out 60 seconds, then jump to the stargate to join the more important battle. If you yourself are being tackled and engaged, if you do not fire back, you have no aggression. I'm going to broadcast myself as a target. Fleet, please tackle my Atron. Everything on me. EWAR only, please. No offensive modules, no damage. You will now see top left corner of your screen, you have that player capture their aggression timer running. Alright, I'm well and truly tackled. I've got multiple scrams, a couple disruptions, multiple webs. Very good. Even being tracking disrupted by somebody. Okay, fleet, please de-aggress. Disengage all tackle.
Fun fact, scramming the can also gives a weapons timer.
I'm now going to warp to a nearby structure. Then I'm going to start burning away. Stay where you are for now. Fleet, hold position. Just control space, stop your space and ship in space. Now I'm going to be the bait to simulate as an aggressive NPC ship or hostile player. I'll broadcast myself again, as you can see the bracket in space. Your goal is going to be to catch me. But assuming you don't know where I am, like if you're on a different grid, maybe the FC or another scout says, I found so-and-so, he's at the GE grid off the Fortizar. You might broadcast an align to, which you can see in your fleet broadcast history. So then he'd say, fleet, warp to that at range, pick a random range. So guys, spread yourselves out and pick random ranges, warp to that destination that I broadcasted a line to between 0, 10, 20, 30, 50, 70, 100. This is the staggered tackle approach that groups take to try and catch targets that could be anywhere. Nobody warped at 100. Interesting. So now please come and tackle my Atron. I'm moving very slowly. Micro-warp drives on. Approach me. Activate tackle as soon as you're in range. I'll broadcast myself as a target one more time. Looks like you're all prop modding on burning in. Very good. Again, once you're close, turn off your micro-warp drive, orbit 500. Okay. Fleet de-engage tackle, de-aggress, control space. We are now going to do the same thing, but I'm going to run away in serious earnest. I'm going to, instead of just moving away very slowly, I'm going to run my micro-warp drive at full velocity. In order to catch me, because I'm also flying a fast Tech 1 frigate with a micro-warp drive, you're going to have to overheat your own micro-warp drives. So I'm going to warp off to a gate, and you guys are going to follow me. I'll go ahead and broadcast the gate I'm going to before I do, but I'm not going to tell you what range I'm going to go at. You're going to have to either talk among yourselves and call out, say, I'm going at 50, I'm going at 100, I'm going at 20, so other people know how to spread themselves out and cover the distances. And you're going to have to burn towards me and catch me. I'll keep broadcasting myself as a target so you can identify the purple triangle more easily. But I'm going to be moving at, 3.4k a second. In order to catch me, you have to go faster than that. You'll have to heat your micro-warp drive. You can do this by shift plus left clicking it to pre-activate the heat. You'll see the little green arc at the top turns bright green. You can also click the little green arc at the top to preheat or pre-overload it. Same thing to turn it off. By preheating it, when you first start the micro-warp drive, it'll run at the full heated velocity. This is very important for the initial burst of speed, because the acceleration is very different from a cold micro-warp drive versus a hot micro-warp drive. The initial burst of speed is often the most important if you're catching someone on a gate, because you're both coming up from 0 velocity. Okay, I'm going to warp myself to 3-go at a random range. In 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Follow me, spread yourselves out.
Warping at
Going to
70.
30.
Coming in 70.
Going in
60
100.
volt.
50.
Very good. Good calling out the ranges. I will keep broadcasting myself as the target. I am now burning. You're going to have to heat your prop mods to catch me. You can see I'm burning straight down. Either double click in space or right click approach on my icon. You're all going 5k plus, very good. Tackle me as soon as you're in range. And remember to turn off your micro warp drive, switch to orbit 500 to avoid burning them out, because if you run a heated module too long, you'll build up heat damage. I was pointed, it wasn't, now I'm scrammed, there goes my micro warp drive, and now I'm nice and slow. Those of you who landed far away or late can now easily catch up and get secondary tackle. Make sure your micro drives are off so you don't burn them out. You should have some degree of heat damage. The number of cycles your prop mod runs hot affects how much heat damage the prop mod itself has, and also the adjacent tackle modules on the same mid-slot rack to build up. So Zion, as an example, how much heat damage do you have in your micro warp drive? You can hover over the icon on your UI, give you the percent damage.
Oh, 72.
That is a very
81.
toasty prop mod. That's very indicative of heating a prop mod. It burns out very quickly. You gotta be very careful with heating prop mods for catching up with people. And you will sometimes get bleed onto other tackle modules like your points and webs and scrams to get heat damage as well.
Yeah, I can see it.
So if you have nanite repair paste, let me link that in the chat for you. If you've got some of that in your cargo hold, you can repair your modules on the fly in space. Does anyone happen to have that on themselves at the moment?
Yep, I do.
Yep, I'm using some now.
In order to repair a heated module, first you have to deactivate it to turn it off, and then right-click, repair. It'll start consuming nanite repair paste. It takes a certain amount of time in order for it to fully repair. Nanite repair paste isn't exactly cheap. It'll cost a couple million to have like a 50 or 25 repair paste is probably fine for Tech 1 frigate. If you're feeling like you might actually survive your engagement, bring along 5, 10, 15 paste, see how much of a reward versus cost that turns out for you to be. Because Tech 1 frigates die very quickly, very often, all the time. So nanite paste is maybe if you want to bring it along. Otherwise, we're usually not that far away from blue structures. You can tether up and automatically repair heat damage. So fleet deaggress. Deaggress, stop scrambling, stop tackling. Warp yourselves back to Mothership Bellicose at 0. And anybody who doesn't have nanite repair paste, once your aggression is down to 0, you'll tether up, and the tether will automatically start repairing the heat damage on your modules. Good point, Zal. You can often find nanite repair paste on the wrecks of your enemy ships. So if you're flying around the battlefield and there isn't an active fight, if there is no active fight, you can loot. If there is an active fight, be a part of that. It's a great thing to loot. High value, low volume. Any questions on the exercises so far?
I've noticed that a couple of times before we've warped, you said to stop your ships. Why do we do that?
I did that because you need to have a full certain 75% maximum velocity and direction in order to warp to something. And if you are moving just randomly in space on an orbit or predetermined double click in space, then it'll take you longer to change direction and come up to an align versus if you were holding still. I could have also called for pre-align, so that would be even faster for warps when I called it. Like when the FC always says on stratops, align, 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 long before he says warp. That's because it takes multiple seconds for your ship to change direction and also gain velocity in that same direction. So that when he says warp, and he clicks the button, everybody warps at the same time. That can be important for fleets, less important for tackle. If your micro warp drive is running, that also will drastically increase the amount of time it takes for you to align out and to warp. So if you're micro warp driving around, orbiting a target, flying around in a battlefield, and you click warp on something, if it's not in close to your direction of travel, it'll take you a long time to align out. Turn off your micro warp drive and just leave the command running. Your warp 2, just leave it as warp 2. Once the micro warp drive turns off, you'll probably be moving it fast enough in the right direction to warp a little faster. Helps your align. We have time for one more exercise, then the strat-up happens in about 14 minutes. We will practice the spiral in briefly. So the goal of spiraling in is to double click in space close to your target, but also kind of a little bit away, about 30 degrees. We'll do it one at a time. We'll start with you, Cole. Warp to Herald at 100 kilometers, and then manually double click in space, micro drive on, try to spiral in and tackle towards me. So you'll have the camera facing me, click and pan, and then double click, about halfway between me and the bottom of your screen, if my ship is visible in your front view.
So am I tracking you, or am I doing something else?
You're gonna have to pan your camera back towards my ship and keep double clicking closer to my ship. That was a little bit too close for your initial velocity. You're moving too much straight towards me. You want to move more diagonally. All right, come back towards me and do like you're trying to do a 45-degree angle away from me. Does that make sense? Between me and straight down. Go ahead and turn around. Okay, yep, that's a good angle. And you're gonna have to adjust that pretty quickly as you get closer to me. You gotta double click towards my ship in space, and pan the camera, double click again towards my ship in space, pan the camera, double click again more towards my ship in space. Good, I can see your angle approaching me. You gotta pay attention to distance. Your goal is to get the tackle, so you want to keep tightening the angle of approach in accordance with your distance away. Yep, keep pulling closer, keep pulling closer. That's good. From there you can manually click right click orbit and let the ship do the rest. Come in for tackle, get a scram on me. Turn off your own micro warp drive or else you overshoot. Okay, good. Go ahead and break off. To car your next, warp to me at 100. Try to spiral in towards me. Double click away, but also towards my ship in space. Broadcast myself as the target for reference for positioning. That's much too close to an approach. You want to be more to the side. There you go. It's a little too far, a little bit closer. You're almost perpendicular at this point. That's good. Adjust it, bring it in closer. You're getting closer to me. You gotta keep tightening the spiral.
I was looking at the wrong purple triangle.
That's good. Keep going closer, closer, closer. And here you can right-click orbit 500 and scram me and tackle me when you're in range. Oh, you overshot a little bit. You're coming back around. You cut your micro drive a little too soon there. You hadn't tackled me when you turned it off. Because your ship is moving at 3.5 kilometers per second, you have to think 3.5 kilometers ahead in the future, your distance to the target.
Yeah, I was a little late.
Okay, you're good. Break off. Felipe, you're next. Warp at 100.
Global, ladies and gentlemen, we are forming a coalition startup at approximately 9 minutes at 0100 hours out of Pop Attack Zulu in Quirius. Please start getting safe, get yourselves down to coalition staging, get ready for this op to start. Completely forming out of Voltron comms, stand by for pings.
Alright, Felipe, you're going to be the last one. Very good. That was a nice approach angle initially. Bring it in closer. Very good. Tighter, tighter. Get that orbit in. Right-click orbit. Close. Almost overshot. Then you pull it around. Nice. Got the scram on me. Now you can turn off micro warp drive. Orbit 500. Right, very good. Now the way I was able to tell what everyone was doing and the direction they were moving so easily is because I have my tactical overlay on. It's your UI at the bottom of the screen, to the left of your capacitor. Those 7 little circular icons. One of them is your tactical overlay. If you click that and have it as blue, you get a nice little kind of ring grid in the solar horizontal plane. You get marker numbers for kilometers. Very helpful. But really it shows you velocity arrows. So I'm going to warp back close to you guys. And once I land, I want you guys all to right click, look at Harold Magnussen's Atron in space. If you have the tactical overlay on, you should see a little blue arrow coming out of my ship. That's my velocity. Speed and direction. You guys see it?
Yep.
And if I turn on the micro warp drive, the arrow gets a lot bigger. The size of the arrow is relative to speed, and you'll see it swip around as I change direction. This is very useful for seeing where fleets are turning, where they're moving, where your target is turning, and where your target is moving. If you left-click highlight any other ship in space, you also see that ship's blue velocity arrow coming out of your own ship. So everybody double-click in space, micro drives on, move away from the keep star. And just take turns looking at different ships, just left-clicking on them to highlight them, but not actually right-click looking at them, and to see how the velocity arrows show up. Keep swerving around, changing your direction all the time. You can see the arrows pop up and move around. This is more of an advanced tactic, but it helps you catch people who are already moving at speed to see where they're going if they're turning in any direction. Alright, we are going to start moving over to our forward coalition staging in Aquarius.
I'm just going to jump clone over there. Is that fine?
If you already have ships there, that's fine. If not, we'll just bring the tackle frigates over. First desto's in fleet, FAT 6P. Right-click set destination. Victor TAC 3 should be yellow highlighted. warp yourselves there.
I'm gonna take a bio before this but good class. Thanks very much.
You are very welcome. Any final questions about tackle? Flying tackle?
I've got one for you in regards to my fit on the Executioner. I wasn't able to get it up over 3.5 kilometers per second, even overloading the warp drive. Could it be the wrong warp drive on this?
I'll take a look at it. Link it in fleet. All
Okay.
gates are green. Fleet, all gates are green. Jump in contact. Jump in a line. Keep warping yourselves along the route. Immediately warp yourselves to the next gate. It'll be yellow highlighted HY. Part of that could be skills, Voltaire. There are a couple navigation skills that'll have a big effect on micro warp drives because they're such high modifiers, high percentage modifiers. Aha, you're running an armor executioner, that's why. Because you've got steel plates on there. Those increase your mass and slow down your max velocity.
Gotcha.
Also, your rigs do the same thing. They increase your armor hit points, but the expense of max velocity. So that is a terrible fit for an executioner, I'm afraid. If you ever tank a tackle ship, it should be shield tanked. Because shield buffer has no effect on speed. Whereas armor has a negative drawback.
Well, we need to update the wiki then.
Well, you could hull tank it.
Hull tanking also works, and this is all subjective. This is EVE Online, it's so ridiculously complicated. There's always a situation for any kind of fit. It all depends on the context. But the armor is why you're moving slower.
Will this work for the strat up tonight, or should I go back and buy an H1?
Absolutely. Take whatever you want on fleets. Brave will always welcome whatever you have, any frigate, whatever fit.
In larger fleets, when the FC isn't calling out specific targets for tackle, is it just tackling the primary?
Actually, no. You want to go for whatever's not being called primary, because someone else is probably tackling that one. If you have the knowledge of what's expensive and what's not, go for the expensive ships. Tech 2 recons, Tech 2s, blingy faction battleships, if you recognize those. Otherwise, whatever's closest to you.
Okay.
Tackle on fleets is a bit different from tackle in small gang. In small gang, you want to be on the front line of the fleet, tackling whatever you find as soon as you find it. On bigger fleets, it's better to hang back and to burn tacticals and stay at range. Because if you're sitting within range during the main fight, you just die. The enemy fleet will blap you. They want to stay on grid, they want to fight. Tackling won't do any good at that point. You have to wait until they start trying to leave the grid, and you'll hear the FC start calling for tackle to dive and to commit and get tackle. That's when you warp into a wreck on grid. Watch for wrecks nearby where the enemy fleet is. You warp to one. Heat all your modules, try to burn it and grab tackle on something that before it warps away. There'll always be a couple enemy ships who are slow to align. This concludes the tackle class. Thank you all for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for teaching it.
Thanks, FC.